hand it over to you, Mark. What are we doing in our third and final session?
Our third and final session. First off, hello everyone. Hello to everyone who will be listening and who is listening. Our third session on Founders Therapy is all about taking action and making that change that you want to make so that you're achieving your goals and your dreams. If just a quick recap from the last two sessions, very quickly, for those of you who joined the first session, we talked about how to identify and understand your real challenges, and through that, creating a core set of values that guide you in terms of what your real purpose is in life and what's important to you, what you're passionate about. We also talked about some cool stuff like little techniques around mapping your strengths and weaknesses, using this tool where you can map out the 7 areas of your life so that you can trickle it down to your ultimate core values, or sometimes what's called your higher values, and the importance of formulating the right question so that you really understand what your true challenges are. But that's only the first part and one big part of the puzzle. There's another big part, which was part 2 of the series, which was around getting to know yourself. So in the approach that I take, and I think that probably many people take, to really become the best entrepreneur you can be, the best person you can be, requires getting to know oneself very intimately so that you know what buttons to press, where you're good, where you may be less good. And there are lots of tools out there that allow you to do that: personality tests, psychological tests, you can do hierarchies of needs, etc. But what the practice that I like to use and integrate into this type of a coaching approach is something called human design. And we had a big part of the session around human design because it's an unusual system, which basically tells you what your energetic makeup is as an individual, and then how that energy is telling you how to behave in life. Your strategy in life is the terminology that human design uses. The best way to make decisions based on that energetic makeup that you have. And for those who want to dig into further detail and do readings of human design, you can sometimes unearth that larger purpose in life that you might be looking for. But today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about kind of bringing all of that together, bringing all those pieces of the puzzle together, so that now you can start taking action. Now that you've understood all this information, how do you use it? Well, by taking certain immediate steps and igniting that change. And that's the real thing, is starting the wheel rolling, and eventually it'll roll faster and faster and faster. So what I'm going to talk to you about today are 4 things. And one is about visualizing and what I call feeling the future you. I'll talk about that in just a second. Another thing which all of you, I'm sure, have learned or have heard about, which is how to set goals. Okay, so the difference between, for example, what's a fantasy versus what a goal is. I'm not going to teach you or explain anything that's revolutionary there. It's going to be a reminder of very good practice. Then I also want to talk to you guys about something called accountability management. We'll get to that in a little bit, but it resonates with a question that was asked, I think, in the first or second session around who are the type of people I should put around myself? Where do I get support? And so we'll talk about that under accountability management. And then the last bit is just a quick reminder about, in this next stage in your development, as you're taking action and making change, it's very important to free the mind. This place gets very, very busy and can overtake everything else at times. So just some reminders and some tips of types of things you can do and integrate into your daily lives so that you are freeing your mind and giving it room to achieve your new goals in life. Any questions before starting, or shall I just roll into it?
I don't have any questions at the moment, but I'm sure I will.
All right. So many of you have heard about visualizing the future, mindfulness, and all this kind of stuff. A lot of athletes do this kind of work where they visualize the outcome of their match or their game in order to prep themselves psychologically. And these are tried and tested techniques that come both from the scientific and maybe the less scientific worlds. Essentially what you're doing is you're trying to feed your brain and your body with information that maybe hasn't happened yet, but that you can see very clearly, and therefore program your body to feel before it actually happens. So in terms of how to do this, it's not that complicated, but it takes a little bit of practice, just like playing an instrument or learning a new sport or things like that. Your first step is really simple. You want to imagine, now that you know your goals and or you know who you are and what your challenges are, I want you to imagine, what does that future you look like? What does that future of yours look like? So in the case of an entrepreneur, we'll say, well, what would it feel like? What will it feel like to have that serious investment, to finally get that serious investment? So how are you literally feeling? How are you dressed? Who are the people in the room when that happens? Where did that deal happen? What were the smells? What were the sounds? You really want to give a lot of detail to that future image that you have where you want to get to. And that can be professional or personal. It can be a short-term goal, or it can be a goal in 10 years. The purpose of this exercise is to give as much detail as possible so that you're teaching your brain and your body how it actually feels before it's happened. So it's like tricking your mind and your body a little bit. And from an energetic perspective, what does this do? This opens up your energy fields. For those of you who are into this stuff, it opens up your energy fields. And for those of you who are familiar with the law of attraction, you're putting yourself in an energetic position to attract lots of good things that will be aligned with those goals or that image that you're looking for. Again, it doesn't happen overnight. This takes a while for it to happen, but with constant practice, you'll get there. A couple of tips in terms of how you can start imagining and building that detailed future. Let's go all the way back to session 1, where we talked about the 7 areas of life. So the spiritual, emotional, vocational, family, social, etc. You can use that framework to help structure your future image, right? So you say, okay, in my future life, my family is going to look like this. My job is going to look like this. My social circle and my network is going to look like this, etc., etc. And again, you try to build that in as detailed a way as possible. Now, the second step to visualizing and feeling this future is the feeling part. Because we often say it's easy to draw an image, but how do you bring in that emotion so that you're programming your brain and your body to feel that emotion? It's just by focusing on feeling rather than image. So again, I'll come back to some of the questions I shared with you earlier. If you're getting a big investment, think of how the euphoria that you might be feeling, or just the overwhelmness of like, wow, I'm finally at this point. I now have the next chapter ahead of me. Does that give you goosebumps? I get goosebumps just talking about it. These are the things you want to focus on: the feelings, the emotions, the waves, not the static, the waves. And that'll help your body and mind condition itself to a future that you're looking for. Any questions on this? Because it's a big one.
It is a big one, yeah. I was going to say, is it something that you should do every day?
Very good question. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in terms of how many times you need to do these techniques. I think you need to feel what's right for you. So I've met people who do this once, twice daily, to people who do it once a month. I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle. And I'm still learning. So I'm learning, but consistency is an important element of this being a successful technique for someone.
I just did a mini one then, and then I got goosebumps.
Keep it going. I mean, it's a never-ending process. Those goals that you're going to set, and we'll talk about this in a minute, they're going to change over time. So you've got to start changing that future image. It's a constant process and constant readaptation. So that's why you want to get it into your daily or weekly or monthly life, which is maybe a good transition to goal setting. So how do I now, I've built this image, I know myself, I know my challenges, how am I going to get there? The best way is very simply to set goals. Set yourself a very clear goal that you think is achievable, and we'll get to the famous SMART acronym around SMART goals. We'll talk about that really quickly. But before I talk about that, an important thing around goal setting, probably the most important thing. When we're in this state of self-discovery and self-motivation, we have a tendency to be on an emotional high in the wave. So we're very optimistic. And what can happen, we can fall into the trap of creating what's called fantasy goals. Mm-hmm. So these are goals that are completely one-sided, that are not attainable, they're not necessarily in alignment with your core values or your highest value, and there's absolutely no strategy or clear steps on how to get there. So I'll give you an example. I want to be rich. It's so general, and and it's a fantasy the way I've expressed it to you, because there's no strategy. How is that aligned to my deepest value in life? How am I passionate about just being rich? What does that mean? Does that mean having $1 million, $100, $10 billion? So fantasy goals, get rid of them. And the best way is to think, are they ridiculous or not? Mm-hmm. Are they unclear? Is there not a clear way forward to get to that point? And then put them aside, and maybe you can use them for inspiration to get to more realistic goals. But you want to try to get to something that is a bit more measurable. A real goal is something that's tangible, right? It's something that is important to you. And why is it important to you? Because it's going to be linked to those highest values that you've pre-mapped when you've done your value mapping. And as I mentioned again, I'm going to repeat this, it's realistically attainable. It's something that you in your current state of being, you can get there with some hard work. Mm-hmm. So how do you set goals to your highest values? Some people will ask. Very simple. Just, is it important to you? Does it inspire you when you think about this goal? And do you exhibit some sort of passion towards it? Is it linked to some sort of passion? If you hit those three or two of those three, pretty sure you've got a good goal there. Mm-hmm. So is it linked to your highest values? Yes, if it is important and or inspirational and or passionate. Yes.
I was just thinking, I'm not quite sure how to frame the question, but if you like sit down, you're like, okay, I'm going to write down my goals, and you're like, I'm completely lost. I don't even know where to start. How do I start this process?
So this kind of leads into what is a goal. So what is a SMART goal? A goal, let me go through SMART, because there's one, the R stands for reachable, and that kind of will answer your question. Yeah. I think that's the best way to address your question. So when you're setting goals, when you're having trouble, try to think of them as something a little bit smaller than that big picture that you've just painted, and focus on something maybe that's within that overall future of yours. What's one sliver of it that you feel that there's a strategy for it and you can set goals towards? Okay. Now, for those goals to be good, they have to follow this fun acronym called SMART. So what is SMART? S stands for specific. So if you're having trouble writing up a goal, it's most likely because you're not being specific enough. Okay, so don't generalize. Don't do the I want to be rich as a goal. No, it's I want to make $100,000 by year 2 or year 3. Something, and then work back from there. How do I get to the 100,000? So maybe it's 50,000, et cetera, and set realistic, specific goals. The second letter, M, and this is the one we always all hate, especially marketers, is measurable. How are you going to measure this goal so you know you've attained it? Is it a number goal that you're trying to achieve? Is it a weight goal? Is it a muscle mass goal? Is it a learning goal, like you want to read X number of books, or you want to have completed a course? Or is it a goal, I want to get X number of investors by X in X amount of time? Make sure you can measure it in some form. So now then SMA stands for aligned. So we were talking about how to get a realistic goal. Make sure it's aligned to your core values. You've done all this great work on yourself. Don't, put that to the side and on the shelf. Start using it to help you set your goals. So does this goal make sense? Is it aligned with one of my highest values? If it is, there's a high likelihood that my energetic pulse is going to be attracted towards it and want to do it. Now, to answer your question, the fourth part of SMART goals are: make sure your goal is reachable. Okay, your initial goal should be something that you can achieve quite easily before getting to the end price. So let's again put ourselves in a startup mode. Imagine you've got this amazing idea for an app, and it's going to revolutionize the world, and it's going to be global, and there's going to be millions of people on it. Slow down a minute, because you've got a long, long way before you get to that end goal, that vision. What's something more reasonable that you can set? Maybe building a minimum viable proposition, right? So getting that beta version or that minimal version that can show people what this is all about and how that next step towards the future. So the way I like to say it is, your initial goal should be something about building a minimum viable proposition, not the fully loaded Rolls-Royce version. So stay simple and reachable. The last letter, T, stands for time. Okay, that's another super, super important thing in goals. You got to give it a time frame, right? So we started out, I got to get rich. Okay, that's way fantasy. I got to make $100,000. By when do I need to make 100,000? Is it in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Okay, now that I know that, I can set some more realistic and attainable and achievable and measurable goals to get to that end goal, which is 100,000. Make sense? It's not fun, exciting stuff, but this is the stuff that
necessary.
It's going to give you the discipline and the rigor and the knowledge of going through goals in an intelligent way. But we don't end there. We don't just set goals, right? We need to actually get work done to achieve those goals. This is the taking charge and making things happen. And I don't know if you guys remember, but I mentioned in the very beginning something called accountability management. So the way it sounds is kind of horrible. It sounds like, oh, I need to work with an accountant and go through numbers. It's nothing to do with this. Accountability management is about finding people around you who can hold you accountable. People who you trust, who you respect, and who also have that time for you to keep you to your plans and help you achieve those goals. So these could be peers, these could be people in your network, professional network, private network, family members, you might have a good relationship. Typically, it could be a coach too. Some coaches provide these services. I know in some cases, not all, it really depends on the, how good a feeling there is between two people. But I do this actually with another coach. We are our respective accountability managers. So we have a weekly call where she holds me accountable to my objectives for the week, for the month, and just checks in on me and says, how are you doing on those things? Did you achieve them? What do you need to do if you haven't achieved them yet? And I have to say, in the beginning, it's a little awkward. And she's like, well. But it's so much nicer to do that than to have a boss or a manager come down on you and be like, hey, why haven't you done this, 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 and this? Or when are you going to get this? You're asking a friend who you probably have a great deal of respect for to, in a kind way, keep you on track. So it's not easy to find that person. Again, all of this stuff takes time to build. You don't find out and figure out yourself and set your goals overnight. But we have those people around us. Now, in terms of accountability management, once you've found that partner to help you out, then you need to start reviewing, refining, measuring, what most people will say every day. I don't subscribe to every day because that's just not my personality, but I try to do this weekly, if not on more than a weekly basis. So what do I mean by review and refine? go to your goals again, those goals that you set for yourself. Keep going back to them. How do they link to my core values? Am I getting the most out of this? Is this still valid at this point of time? Because goals aren't static. If you're achieving goal after goal and you're working towards something, then those old goals become obsolete. So you have to set yourself new goals. So it's a constant check-in process. And again, like learning a sport, like learning an instrument, it takes time to develop that habit and make it also an enjoyable habit. At the beginning, you haven't achieved a lot of goals. So, but once you start checking the boxes, it feels good.
Just as I think this goes back to something that someone said in the first session where it was like, when you were doing the 7 areas of life, it's like, when you write all this down, is this the same with your goals? Like your goals, do you have like is it good to get a specific goal notebook and like that's the notebook you go to?
I think for all of these things, when you're doing any personal work, which is what often people will think in the beginning is a sort of, I'm doing a little parentheses in my normal life to start looking into me. Hopefully, as you start going down that journey, it no longer becomes a parentheses, it becomes part of your life. But to give it symbolism, to give it that sense of, okay, this is my priority right now. Always great to buy a book. If you like writing, a Moleskine type book, or some people like really colorful books. If you're artistic and like pictures, I encourage you to cut pictures out, cut words out, stick them on, make a collage. Whatever technique is going to resonate best with you, whether it's drawing, writing, definitely have that book of you. I call it my self-discovery book. It's not very original, but I have a Moleskine, and that's what I go back to.
I'd have to have that one book. I definitely.
And that can become a very important and symbolic step in your journey towards getting to know yourself and getting into this type of work on yourself, because it's saying, okay, I'm putting an intention into buying a super special magical notebook that's going to be part of my journey to getting to the better version of myself. So for some people that it's really important, for others couldn't care less. Just need a piece of paper, write it down. It's really what works for you.
Nice.
So I have a tip for the day. In terms of all this accountability management stuff, a lot of you are probably thinking, great, you set your goals and everything, but I really have trouble motivating. I just can't even get to that point where I can sit down and write goals down, or how do I come up with actions to achieve those goals? So this is going to sound a little bit high level, but it does work. What you can do, you can ask yourself the following question as you wake up in the morning, or when you've decided to sit down and do that planning that you need to do. So I'll repeat it twice. What is the highest priority action I can do today that will help me fulfill my highest value? I'll repeat it. What is the highest priority action I can do today that will help me fulfill or achieve my highest value, that will contribute to my highest value? Okay. Other people like a slightly different version of this question, which is, what is the one thing today that will help me get one step closer to my dream? Okay, those are the two ways of looking at it. So when you're getting stuck, just ask yourself that question. And remember, it's just one small step. That means you've taken one step forward.
Do you do that every day?
As much as I can, yes. Yeah. And then this is another last important thing, and what I'd like to consider part of accountability management. You're also accountable for yourself, not just having a friend being accountable for you. So don't forget to pamper yourself, to reward yourself. You're doing so much work here on yourself, and it's just between you and you. No one else is involved in this. So don't forget to remind yourself that you've done a good job, even when it feels rough. So find those things that make you feel good. So for some people, it's a spa. For some people, it's a weekend getaway. For some people, it might be a night out. Don't feel afraid to reward yourself with those things. And just remember, you're linking that pleasure moment to an accomplishment. Right? So you're amplifying that feeling of, wow, this feels good. So It's a great little technique.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives a lot of good vibes.
No, I can second that. A regular massage, if anyone can. It does wonders for your weeks, I promise.
So, which is actually a nice link into this last part, which is about freeing your mind, right? So that part of that is rewarding yourself. But when we talk about freeing your mind, all of us, because we're working on projects and trying to build businesses and change the world, and for some it's making lots of money, for others it's finding jobs, for others we get stuck up here because we're using this brain, this part of our energy and our muscle, so much that it goes on automatic and it keeps on working. And so we have to find techniques to just shut it off a little bit, or just get it in tune with our body. We're not just our heads. We have the rest of our body that goes with it. And that body's got a lot of energy centers and needs to be activated and recalibrated and all of that. So easy things that you can do to achieve that. We talked about some of them in the last session, breathing, things like that. I would recommend thinking or asking yourself, what is an activity that I enjoy doing where I feel calm, or that calms me as I do the activity? And if you got that activity, go and do that regularly. Figure out how to program that into your weekly schedule so that you're getting that moment to shut this off and get everything aligned. So for some people, that could be sports, tennis, boxing, running. For others, it could be meditation. It could be a massage. It could be yoga. There's so many things out there. I'm not here to recommend. I'm here to suggest that you try a bunch of things out if you don't already know what works for you. Enjoy that process of discovering new stuff and see what works best for you. It might be a combination of a few things in some cases, not just one technique. However, what I do recommend to look at first, because these are tried and tested and usually parts of larger programs, is breath work. So I mentioned last time this technique called the 4-5-6 approach. It's very simple. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 5 seconds, breathe out for 6 seconds. And you do this to relax, and you do it slowly. You try to do it 5-6 times until suddenly you realize, hey, I'm not thinking anymore. I'm focusing on my breath. Once that's happened, you're done. You don't need to keep doing it. Some people who are familiar with a practice called Kundalini. So for people who like that, that kind of stuff, there are certain Kundalini schools that do very intensive breath work. You can even pass out from some of the exercises when you're not used to it. They do this to achieve a certain sense of energetic vibe or whatnot, a bit like hot yoga, for example. Like put yourself into an extreme condition. But there are lots of schools. So there's soft Kundalini and hardcore Kundalini. Other stuff is just very basic, slow, deep breathing. There's a lot of apps out there that can help you do this, but it's literally just about breathing with your whole apparatus, not just your chest or just your diaphragm, and getting your whole body involved. So I highly recommend reading up on that. Tantric breathing, for example, that's a lot of fun. It's a slightly different way of breathing. You're breathing out of what's called your root energy, so between your legs. That can be a little weird and funny at first, but it's another way of creating energetic circulation, if you're the best way to put it. So I, again, highly recommend, go find out about this stuff. It's fun. See what works for you. Keep an open mind, and then maybe adapt things to yourself as well. You're your own master. Second big chunk for freeing your mind, obviously meditation, mindfulness, that sort of stuff. Very helpful, very accessible. You just need to go onto YouTube to find millions of types of meditations. What I would suggest is look for meditations, what is called guided meditations, where you have someone who's walking you through the meditation. They can usually last between 7 and 25, 30 minutes. If you're a beginner, try for the 7 to 15 minutes. Once you start doing it a little bit, and if you like it, you can do that 15 to 30-minute sessions. There are lots of different guided meditations. So they can be for attracting money. They can be for just finding peace. They can be for visualizing your future. They could be for self-healing. I mean, there's tons out there. Again, I invite you to find some for yourself, see what resonates with you. That said, for the whole visualization and trying to see the future and ignite that change in yourself energetically, I have a super recommendation. There's a fantastic neuroscientist from the US called Dr. Joe Dispenza. That's Dispenza, getting quite well known. And he's got these two meditations. They're called Morning Meditation and Evening Meditation by Dr. Joe Dispenza. You can find them, I think, on Apple Music and some other places, Spotify probably. They're great. So again, for someone who hasn't done meditation before, it can feel a little weird at first because he's asking you to do things that might not be normal, like feeling the space around your throat or things like that. But they're really well guided, and they really help you start building a vision of the future and bringing it towards you closer and closer. Really, if you do that, really important to do both of them. I think Dr. Dispenza would recommend, if you only did one, to do the evening one. In my practice, I actually prefer the morning one, but I notice a really big difference in terms of when I do them regularly, morning and evening. That's not to say to do them every day.
Yeah.
But again, take a break, reward yourself. It's great just to have done it 5 days in a row. Good job. Take a day off.
What would you say that some of the benefits that you get out of doing regular meditation is?
Very good question. Again, this might sound a little more on the spiritual, esoteric side, but I feel that I am much more aware of my surroundings, what's going on. I'm more attentive to people's behaviors. I'm listening to people, to the environment more. So I'm picking up on cues that I might not have seen if my mind were busier.
Mm-hmm.
There are days though when I can't do it. Please. Last thing I want to do is meditate.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is I'm much more Zen than, I know it sounds cliche, but when big things, it could be a family situation, financial issues, I don't know, a difficulty at work. It doesn't affect me as much anymore. I really take it with a lot more calm and ease.
Nice. Yeah. I tried the other day and I couldn't. It was just one of those days. So it's also just learn to know the day to start.
Yeah. Well, again, depending on that energetic makeup of yours that you find out in this methodology through human design, there might be better days or better times to do it than others because of the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
There might be certain settings that work better for you than others. But again, if you're getting stuck with meditation, I can't recommend enough the 4-5-6 breathing technique.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 2 minutes, and it just really. I know, for example, the other day I was walking. I'm in the beautiful southwest French countryside, in this magnificent house. And the other morning, I decided to walk to the little village to go pick up a baguette, typical French thing to do. I don't know what was going on with me, but I was walking to this village as if I was living in New York. I was walking fast, I was tense, and then I suddenly slowed down, but I still felt that sort of nervous energy. So I just 4-5-6, 4-5-6, 4-5-6, 3 to 5 breaths later, completely tuned out. I was in the village, where I was, and enjoying what was my surroundings, and enjoying arriving to the bakery, smelling the fresh smell of bread and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So it really helps.
Mm-hmm. I need to integrate it. I was like, the other day, I was like trying to remember, I was out somewhere and I was like, is it 4 in, 5 out? I was like, I need to go back and listen again. I was like, I don't think I'm doing this right.
Yeah.
No, those are amazing tips. I actually have a question going back to when you were saying about having people that hold you accountable.
Yes.
So at TFF, and especially when the challenge is on, we have all these amazing teams. What we try and do is encourage teams to learn from each other, have really kind of get going with this peer review kind of relationships. So is there any tips you can give around starting a kind of like peer mentorship type relationship?
Yes. The accountability management relationship is quite intimate because you are confiding into this person your personal and professional goals. Obviously, you can split the two, but it's going to be much more powerful if you are having that level of intimacy with the person. We're really sharing something that's quite personal to you. And so again, back to how do you choose your accountability manager? Find someone who you have a really good feeling with. And we know it's not every, you have some people you just have a click, there's a fit, and that works. It could be someone that you meet through the TFF community, through all the amazing things that TFF is bringing to support these entrepreneurs. You might be on a chat, or there might be a challenge, or there might be a live session or an event where you'll meet someone, you'll start exchanging information, and then you realize, hey, this person really, I resonate with this person. I want to bring this person into a part of my life. Can you be my accountability? It's not something that it's not something that you should do lightly, is what I'm saying. You're asking a big favor of someone, and the person is, and you're also asking a big favor of yourself, because you're telling, well, if I do commit to this person, for I have to be honest and open and respectful of the time that they're giving me and the energy that they're giving me to achieve my goals.
And you don't want to get discouraged either. If you've picked a bad partner, it could probably discourage you.
No, and some people have multiple accountability partners. So I know someone who's very into fitness, but also has a business and is also into spirituality. In his instance, he hasn't met someone who can help him be accountable for those three areas of his life. So over time and through fitness, he's found someone who he has a great fit with, and that person is the go-to person for fitness. Another one for business, and another one for spirituality. But those three paths, those are his three businesses, if you want. Those are his three most important values in life. So all his energy is going to those three things. So it makes sense to have an accountability manager in that case. But, he doesn't have an accountability manager for how to raise his kids. Because that for him flows naturally. He doesn't have trouble with that. It's not a challenge.
No, that's true. And like, honestly, the thing, it's funny because like as the years go on or time goes on, everything that you've said in these past like 3 sessions, and especially like today, when you look at what a successful person looks like, they are doing all of these things that you are saying. And I think that is really becoming more and more apparent to me how much you have to invest in. If you want to be serious about this, you want to be successful, you have to invest in yourself.
You got the message.
Yeah. Founders therapy works. I have Q&A. What if I set myself lots of goals and use the SMART process but simply don't reach them? How do I keep motivated, or am I setting the wrong goals? Ooh.
Excellent question. If you're not reaching them, remember we talked about having to review regularly your goals. So the question you would ask yourself is, why am I not reaching them? Which will then lead to, I think, that second part of your question, which is, how do I keep motivated? I would just rephrase it and say, why am I not motivated to achieve these goals? And then hopefully that's going to get you thinking to, are they linked to my highest values? Are they important to me? Am I inspired by them? Am I passionate about them? If you're not answering two or more of those, it's most likely the wrong goal. It could be also that the goal is too lofty, too fantasy. There's no clear strategy of how to get there, so it just seems unattainable. So another way of addressing that is make the goal more attainable, which is the A in SMART.
Yeah. Is there any kind of, I don't know, tools to help you set those goals? In like, I don't know, is there any kind of like, people are obsessed with apps these days? Is there any kind of like?
I haven't looked in big detail around goal setting apps. I'm sure there are a gazillion of them out there. Again, it depends what type of person you are. If you need to have an Excel table or just a big whiteboard, or something, every person's a bit different. I would say the easiest approach is a very simple Excel table, right? Where you have in a column the 10, 15 goals that you are trying to achieve in the year that are contributing to a larger goal. Okay, so you've got your 15 goals here. You've got your time frame here on your horizontal axis, and all you have to do is, like a Gantt chart, just create a bar, right? That's telling you, for this goal, it's going to need from January to mid-March to achieve. And then you can put notes under that specific goal saying, here are the things I need to do to get to that sub-goal. It's basic planning, but just applying it to yourself. It becomes a Gantt chart, and you break it down, break it down, break it down. It's the easiest way.
Nice. In a similar vein, is there any other kind of like life hacks and things that you use in a tech capacity that you can share with anybody?
Not on goal setting, I'm sorry to say.
Not on goal setting, but in the wider.
Yeah. I've played around a little bit with diary apps, if that works. It hasn't worked for me. What ends up always working for me is when I write something down with my hand, it somehow impregnates in my head. So what I often do is I sketch something first, and then I put it either into PowerPoint or Word or Excel to sort of imprint it and to be able to track it, because having loose pieces of paper around never works for me either. So I do a combination of things. Other people, they love project management tools like Monday.com. Some people are just nuts about that, or Trello. As an individual, I don't feel I need that level of planning and complexity. Maybe for businesses, yes, it makes sense. But again, you got to adapt it to who you are. Some people like to do super colored versions where they use beautiful penmanship and paints because they're putting so much intention into setting their goals in a very deliberate way.
I have a question from Paul. What are your thoughts on repurposing? Let's say I worked on sustainability for X years. At one point, I find highly attached to other causes like privacy, gender equality. How do I repurpose my mental framework and start afresh?
I wish I had a silver bullet answer to that, Paul. I'm going to be very open here. I've recently been through this phase in my career and in my choices. I worked for many years in the corporate environment. Some of you know at Syngenta, working for one of the biggest ag chem firms in the world, in branding and communication, so promoting chemicals and genetically modified seeds, which in most cases was really I learned a lot. I saw how it could contribute to feeding the population. But when you work in these big corporations, you also see sometimes the other side of the coin. And after a few number of years, I started seeing that side of the coin more than I was seeing the bright side of the coin. And I think my values changed over time. What I was looking for in terms of a work environment was now something different. And it took me a while to realize that. So I'd say, to answer your question, one, realize why you want to change. and understand what are those shifts for. Because if you're not understanding them, then you're not going to make something that's in alignment with who you are and what your values are. So that then goes into, how do I repurpose my mental framework? Well, doing this core value exercise, mapping out your strengths and weaknesses, understanding your challenges. This is the best way to repurpose, I wouldn't say just your mental framework, but your overall framework, mental, body, energetic, so that you can be an even better, more complete person coming out of that experience in your example of sustainability. So yes, follow this methodology, it works.
Just start. It's all about starting. So I've got another question from Marie. How can I apply this thinking to a team, e.g. for a startup? If we set a goal for the company, how do we achieve it and use these tools for that?
Great question. So, of course, you can apply this stuff to a business, a more group business setting. We would call that strategic planning in most cases. And in a lot of startups, once you start having an idea and you start getting an understanding of your market, everything, you need to come up with a vision and a mission. And what a lot of consulting companies call a strategic house. That strategic house has a few major components, which the big strategic things that you need to get done in order to achieve that mission and vision, right? So you can translate that into saying, okay, what goals do I need to achieve in order to address that strategic axe, which is hitting the vision? Another way of saying that, vision is our future self, right? The mission statement is the broader purpose or how we're going to get there. And then you start having your core values or your strategic initiatives. And then under that, your goals to get to those, to fulfill those initiatives. So that's how I would use this. You know, so apply, you could use, I'd have to think a little bit about how to shift the 7 areas of life, but the first thing that's coming to mind is Michael Porter and his way of splitting up the industry into 5 parts. That could be a way of doing it. I don't know. I'll come back to you on a specific answer for that, but I'm sure we could very easily adapt it using more business-focused terminology. Okay, for example, if you're thinking about operational change, you could list, instead of having 7 areas of life, you have your 7 major areas of operations. So human resources, legal, product development, etc.
Nice. Well, I'm not sure if anybody else has any more questions. We do have 12 minutes. We have up until 12 minutes.
Free advice for 12 minutes?
Free advice for 12 minutes? Well, I'd like to say, just as you know, working with many companies and having your own experience, is there any kind of like heart to heart that you can advice that you can give these young people that are really trying hard to better the world, and in many cases probably get knocked down and have to get back up again?
I mean, it's going to come back to, it might sound a little cliche, it's come back to the methodologies. Guys, get to know yourselves. Once you know yourself, you're not going to get knocked down, because you're not going to let yourself get knocked down, because you know how you work, you know what environments you function best in, you know where you're going to have success. So you're going to go, you be attracted, you are going to attract those kinds of situations. But until you have that deep knowledge of yourself, you're aware of your limitations, you're aware of your strengths, of your purpose, what you're here to do and how to best use the tools that you've been given. You're always going to be a little bit frustrated until you know that. And that's also part of the journey of life. Right? I don't know if anybody has discovered their entire perfect true self. Maybe that's what enlightenment is, who knows? But embracing that journey and enriching it, because you have a whole lifetime to get to know yourself. So enjoy it. It's going to take that whole lifetime.
I have a question from Paul. You spoke about wellness from an individual perspective. While running a company, how do I create a wellness culture?
Ah, the consultant in me wants to turn that question around to you, because I know, to you meaning the listeners, because I know you all have a good answer for that. So how do you create a wellness culture? It depends what your vision of wellness is and what your company wants to represent within wellness. If we're talking about self-discovery and being the best person you can be, well, if you want to create that kind of culture, you would encourage people to take time out, either of their days or of their weeks or the months, and dedicate them to self-discovery, and hopefully have a number of different activities to provide them with, or to propose them, and say, hey, go try these out, see what works for you, see what doesn't work for you. I know of some companies that offer yoga and meditation every morning now. So for those who want them, and it's very interesting, they're very, when you walk into that company, which works in the SaaS business, so it's tech, fast-paced, you walk in, they are zen. They also have integrated clean eating into their culture. So the company offers free food Mondays through Fridays, I think, so all week, but it's only non-processed foods and it's all vegetarian.
Amazing.
So yeah, there are lots of ways to create a wellness culture.
Mm-hmm. And I guess.
Sorry, I was just thinking of another, this executive that I met through my years of experience. He would always start out his meetings with a breath exercise to just get people to calm down, turn off their minds, and then get focused on the topic at hand.
Oh, that's brilliant. I like that one.
Yeah.
Gets everybody on the same page as well before you even start. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah. Yeah, I was just, well, one of these things is funny. So if you obviously have your team, like you have your team or you're running a company, one thing that I was thinking about doing with our team is saying for like in the new year, everyone has to go find a side project. Because like if you work on the same thing the whole time, your mind is going to get so full and it's not going to know how to think differently. So everyone go find yourself a side project, and then once a week we will hold each other accountable to how that side project is going on.
And what if that side project was them?
Yes,
the individual.
Exactly. What? Sorry, I was so thirsty. So, what are some of the mistakes that you've made over the years that you've really learned from on your journey?
Being judgmental about this kind of stuff early on in my life. So saying meditation, I don't need to meditate, or I can't meditate, or yoga, even though I used to do martial arts, so I'm flexible. For yoga, for me, seemed a little silly at first. I had these preconceptions, and the day I took that mask off, it was just a delight, because I really have fun. It's like going to an amusement park for me to discover and read, try all these different these approaches to well-being. So that's one thing I would say is really, be aware if you are judgmental, and just do yourself a service. Rip that mask off. It's not doing anyone any good. It's just a waste of energy. Other mistakes that I've made. So this comes back to human design. Being an emotional person, I have a tendency to react a little too spontaneously sometimes, because I'm feeling it rather than thinking it through. So that was a big mistake I used to make, was not letting the emotional wave pass before speaking or before making a decision or a commitment. Be aware of your audience, I would say. Not everyone is going to be open to mixing business and energetic approaches. I think more and more people are today aware of it, especially with millennials and Gen Z. But some people, this is weird stuff to them. So you have to be respectful of that. If it's not their cup of tea, not their cup of tea. And that's okay. They might have other great techniques that work for them. So yeah, I've made that mistake a couple of times.
Yeah. How many years have you been on this non-judgmental discovery for?
I'd say that my first awareness of it was business school, so in my late 20s. That's also where I became aware of my emotional emotions being quite dominant in who I am.
Hmm.
And I think between 30 and 40 was probably constant work on being aware of it, trying to see it when it happened, but it was still very difficult to act upon it and change. And then when I started this, the more in-depth journey to self-discovery and trying all these practices, I don't know, there wasn't a moment where I said, click off. It happened gradually, but it accelerated once I started trying stuff and making a point of going into it and going, I don't care what happens, I'm just going to enjoy the moment.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I have that like awareness thing, and I'm like, oh, I know I do that, and then I'm like, oh, why am I doing that again? And it's like, how do I move into the action?
I don't think there's an answer. Everyone's rhythm is different. You can relate it. You could just compare it to relationships. Sometimes you're at the end of a relationship, it should end, but and you're aware of it. But there are other things and complications that sway you to stay with the person. It's as complicated. That's a relationship you have with yourself. This going from awareness to taking action and making change. It's
a process.
Yeah. And we talk about loving yourself and whatnot. That's all part of it too. Is in order to love yourself, you need to accept who you are, and then love that.
We're getting to the end of our 3-part series of Founders Therapy. I'm going to leave you to say any closing notes from our 3 sessions.
If you're on the path to self-discovery, I applaud you. I support you. We are here to help continue and discuss and guide you on that path. For those of you who are not yet on the path to self-discovery, you actually are, because that is part of our purpose in life. And I hope that these 3 sessions, or even part of these sessions, have just tickled your interest a little bit to start opening up that mind and really digging into who you are, so that you can be the best version of yourself and achieve all the goals that you want in life.
And I highly recommend, if anyone has only just caught maybe this session, I highly recommend going back for the previous 2. I know for a fact that I will be doing that over my short Christmas break, and really kind of writing everything down and starting a new year afresh. This is the perfect time to have been doing these sessions with you, Marc. So we're very grateful. And I would like everybody to stay tuned as well in terms of waiting for an offer that is going to come from Marc and TFF. And Marc will be packaging up his services for you guys and giving a discounted cost for various different packages that you would be interested in. Having one-on-one sessions with Marc. You can really get to the bottom of it. Well, thank you so much. If I do not speak to you, have a wonderful Christmas.
Thank you. And very, very happy holidays to everyone who is and will be listening.
All the best for 2020. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.